a lot of the conversations that we've been having with our clients about people within facilities management, facilities maintenance, retiring, right? We're losing a lot of the knowledge that we have from this industry. So we need to bring more people in. So if we're looking at this 19% group, we're obviously looking to grow it. We're looking to get more of the Gen Z people into the trades. So what is it going to take to get them in, not only in to the industry, into the trades, but keep them here because that's going to be
Yeah.
huge.
Welcome to Connected FM, a podcast connecting you to the latest insights, tools, and resources to help you succeed in facility management. This podcast is brought to you by IFMA, the leading professional association for facility managers. If you are ready to grow your network and advance in your career, go to ifma.org to get started. Today we're joined with Quinn Heimann, Director of Strategic Sales, and her colleague Jason Wetherford, Strategic Account Executive at Aerotek. Together, they delve into the complexities of today's labor market. And with over 36 years of combined experience in the staffing industry, Quinn and Jason bring valuable insights into the challenges companies face in attracting and retaining talent. From the impact of competitive wages to the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, they explore key strategies for organizations to thrive in an ever-evolving workforce landscape. Now, let's get into it.
Hey, facility managers. Are you passionate about sharing your knowledge and insights with a global audience? IFMA is inviting subject matter experts like you to contribute to our blog. Showcase your expertise, elevate your profile, and connect with a thriving community of professionals. Whether it's the latest trends, best practices, or innovative solutions, your voice matters. Join us in shaping the future of facility management. Contact marketing at ifma.org to get started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Quinn Heimann. I'm a director of national accounts at Aerotek. I've been in the staffing industry and with Aerotek for 13 years. So really excited to be here today to dive into some good information just about the labor market, DEI and B, and what's going on. I've got my partner Jason here as well. Jason, good to see you.
Good to see you, Quinn. Like Quinn said, my name's Jason Wetherford. I'm a strategic account executive for Aerotek, and I've been in the recruiting industry and with Aerotek for just over 23 years.
Just a few years there, Jason.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm excited to dive in here with you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to be here with you.
Awesome.
I wanted to start by sharing who Aerotek is and what gives us a unique perspective on the topic of the labor market. We're a leading staffing provider in North America, and every day we hear about changes in the evolving labor market and how it's requiring companies to really look in the mirror and reevaluate what they can do to attract and retain employees. Let's start with today's labor market. What are some of the challenges that companies are facing when it comes to attracting and retaining talent?
Ooh, isn't that the loaded question, right? We get asked that
Absolutely.
constantly. So great one to start with. I mean, the most obvious is that there aren't enough workers for all the job openings. So there's zero point 0.7 unemployed workers per job opening, and competition is really fierce, which means organizations are having to really pull out all the stops. And we're seeing companies do that. They're not afraid to pull out, all the stops. Just this year over year, we've seen hourly earnings of like production or kind of non-supervisory roles increase by 4.4%. In some industries, like even more around like transportation or warehouse, it's actually up to 7% from a payment standpoint, which is crazy. The other thing is that, there has been a little bit of decrease in some industries, right? So I know we're seeing and hearing that in the news. But the power still really lies in the hands of talent, Jason. From a large majority, the unemployment rate, still being at 3.9%. But what I think is really interesting there is that the workers that are ages about 25 to 54, right? So where you would look to see the large amount of people in the workforce, that number of people employed is still at a 20-year high. So yeah, it's definitely, a challenge right now.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting when you think about what we're hearing on the news about tech layoffs and everything that's going on with the economy. But overall, it's still a very tight labor market currently. How does what we're seeing today compare to what we've seen in past years?
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there, right? So, despite a recent slowdown in hiring, workers are still faring pretty well in this labor market. Unemployed workers specifically are still finding jobs at a pace that's kind of roughly equal to what we saw pre pandemic. And, the ratio of job openings to unemployed workers really held steady in the most recent jobs report, and it's above the pre pandemic ratio. So, you know, with that being said, the layoff rate also is still at historical lows. So it's about 1%, which is 20% below the average rate, pre-pandemic, which was like 2017 to 2019. The other
Right.
thing, and I know we've talked a little bit about this already, but compensation, right? If you look at like the employment cost index, I mean, that's actually increased 1.1% just in the second half of this year. So yeah, it really is, when you look at the today's labor market compared to past years, like it still really is an employee market right now.
Right. When you say it's, workers are still faring well and an employees driven market, I mean, can you talk about some of the things that job seekers and employees are demanding from employers? What are we seeing out there currently?
Yeah, I laugh a little because obviously we know it. I mean, it starts with what no one really wants to talk about, but market pay wages, right?
Mhm. Right.
Like ensuring competitive wages is the only way to be an employer of choice and really assure that you can attract and retain employees. I mean, from the, from the conversation around like, hey, the lowest somebody would be willing to take a job. I mean, that's actually increased by 8% from July of last year. And that's based on some surveys that were done by like, New York Fed and some of these other labor market analysis groups.
That's huge.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but Aerotek did a big job seeker survey. And one of the results that we found out from that is that pay is still the number one job motivator. And that's by a
Mhm.
long shot. So, people who are looking for jobs right now, if their financial situation was the same or worse than it was in 2022, that is their biggest motivator. The second thing, though, let's talk not just about pay, right? Not just
Right.
about that thing. The second thing, though, is we are also seeing like a ton of folks that are interested in opportunities to learn new skills. And that really came in right behind pay and job security on that survey that we did. It was the third most important factor for job seekers. And me being a little bit kind of data driven, I always love to say, okay, so the survey that we did, does this align with what we're seeing elsewhere? And it definitely does.
Right.
Gallup, right, Jason, which is a pretty big group that runs surveys and
Mhm.
studies, they did a recent one and saw that 48% of American workers would switch to a new job if offered skills training opportunities. And 65% of workers said that they believe employer provided upskilling is really important when they're evaluating a new potential job or opportunity. So I think market weight wages we know is huge, but then also this kind of focus on opportunity to learn new skills.
Right. I think that as we were going through the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, and everybody was just, I mean, we took off on a rocket ship and everybody was throwing money at people. We saw a lot of that, just throwing money at people to get them into jobs, to get them into, doing the work. So it is honestly nice to see, some of these statistics about other things that are important to job seekers, like opportunities to learn new skills. It's not just all about, hey, we're going to give you 50 cents more. We're going to give you $2 more. They're also interested in opportunities to gain new skills and to improve their abilities on the job. So that's a great thing to see.
Definitely. With that being said, too, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is definitely a talking point as well. Um,
Absolutely.
I think that is something we're seeing job seekers be more interested in jobs this year as well. Again, going back to some data, Monster did some recent research and found out that 86% of job seekers that kind of have come through Monster believe that a company's approach to DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion is an important factor when considering a future employer. Specifically to facilities and maintenance, with our job seeker survey, we found out that 19% of recent applicants for facilities and maintenance positions were between the ages of 18 to 24. And
That's
that's really,
interesting.
yeah, exactly. Because that particular generation and that age group, they're specifically really looking for a commitment to DE and I. That generation, right? Gen Z, right? Kind of born between 1997 and
Mhm.
2012. They're part of what we're now referring to as the first majority minority generation. And what that means is that more than half the members of this group don't identify as white. And in addition, more than one in five, or about kind of 20, 21%, if you want to put a number on it, identify as part
Mhm.
of the LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
So, yeah, for Gen Z, a company's stance, from inclusive language to flexible benefit policies, employee demographics really is going to signal how, Gen Z and their peers are going to be likely to be treated in your workplace.
That's really interesting too, because, a lot of the conversations that we've been having with our clients about people within facilities management, facilities maintenance, retiring, right? We're losing a lot of the knowledge that we have from this industry. So we need to bring more people in. So if we're looking at this 19% group, we're obviously looking to grow it. We're looking to get more of the Gen Z people into the trades. So what is it going to take to get them in, not only in to the industry, into the trades, but keep them here because that's going to be
Yeah.
huge. I'm part of our SS&O team's diversity board, and we've been hearing a lot about not only DE&I, because that's kind of table stakes at this point, but a new thing that we've been hearing about is belonging. Can you talk a little bit about belonging, DE&I and B, and
Yeah.
why is that important when we're looking to attract and retain new talent?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because belonging is kind of a new word, right? And belonging, kind of in the context of work, refers to like a person's sense of being accepted by not just their colleagues, but the organization as a whole. And when someone feels like they belong, it means they feel valued and safe enough to bring their whole selves to work. And so, again, looking at what's been trending in the recent years, employee engagement in the US has declined a little bit from about 36% of engaged employees in 2020 to 32% in 2022. And notes that come along with that is feeling cared about at work or connected to an employer's mission
Mhm.
were among the engagement elements that decline the most, specifically for women and this younger generation of workers.
That's really interesting. It's definitely like I alluded to, and that speaks to it. You can bring people in to your organization, but if they don't feel like they belong, if they don't feel like they're part of the team, if they're not part of the organization, eventually they're going to leave. So
Yeah,
belonging is incredibly important.
absolutely.
If you can't see it, you can't be it. I think that's one thing that we've talked about a lot. If you can bring a diverse group of people into your organization, but if they don't feel like they're part of the team, if they don't see the opportunity in front of them, if they don't see people like them being successful and moving up in the organization, they're going to go somewhere else. So that's really important.
Yeah, I like
What are
that little
some,
saying there.
right, right. Do you have any examples of how some employers have been kind of improving their P and I and B in the workplace?
Yeah. I think from an example standpoint, it starts with education. So, building a more diverse, kind of equitable workplace starts with really just the understanding and the education. So, one thing we do here at Aerotek is we've committed to training every employee on how they can improve our culture. We invest in our people to create like more inclusive leaders and employees at every level within the
Mhm.
organization. On top of that, there's building those employee manager relationships. So, HR leaders looking to promote a sense of belonging by guiding managers on how to establish trusting relationships with team members. And it begins with respectful communication and open dialogue across kind of all levels of the organization.
Mm.
Nurturing people's strengths, Jason, is another one. From leaders and managers, it's like, hey, how can you acknowledge professionals' achievements and talents to motivate them to continue contributing quality work? But then also championing diverse representation within their organizations, within the industries that we serve. Aerotech has been really devoted to advocating for underrepresented employee communities through different structured programs and partnerships that we do. Skills USA has been one that we've partnered with in terms of trying to fill some of the skills gaps and get folks kind of some of that extra training that they've been wanting.
Right.
And then the last thing, I think just when you're looking at like, hey, how do I improve DE&I and be in the workplace? You got to have transparency. So addressing diversity and inclusion, whether it's in your company code of conduct, so your managers can properly support people, clarifying rights, making sure your work conduct is aligned with company values. And then also like, are you measuring progress within those efforts? Think that's
Right.
really critical to evolution. So, one thing that we always look at is like, hey, are you communicating your plans, communicating the challenges you're seeing, communicating successes, all with transparency, because that's what people are asking for.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to be transparent, right? If there's no
Yeah.
transparency, then there's no point in doing it. And part of that is admitting that, hey, as we're doing these, it's not going to be perfect all the time. This is a work in progress, but the key is that you're just doing the work. So I think that's great advice. A lot of the things that we talk about, they're kind of longer term. They take there's a lot of time. They take a lot of time. Is there any kind of short-term solutions that you've seen or anything that employers can kind of utilize to ensure they're being inclusive to their employees now in the short term?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd say short term, but like quick things that they could look at.
Hmm.
One is removing gender coded language from job descriptions.
Right.
So sometimes an employer will have really great intentions, but then you're kind of removing yourself from some of the competition for talent because of an improperly worded job listing. So gender coded language, like words or phrases that readers may associate with only a particular gender in job descriptions, getting rid of those can really help make opportunities seem more appealing and welcoming to everyone. Um,
Right.
so some examples, right? Like words that could really connotate masculinity or femininity, specifically in like facilities and maintenance industry, right? Terms like tradesman, journeyman, according to the
Right.
employer's council, like consequences of using gender coded language show up in the applicant pool's diversity. And then as a result, it shows up in the diversity of your new hires. So
Right.
that's just really something to keep in mind. Goldman Sachs realized that they saw a ton of results when they just removed the word aggressive from their ads. Like hiring women increased dramatically, almost to the point where they now have a workforce of 50% women. And a huge
Wow.
they
That's
talk
really
about is
interesting.
they had the word aggressive in their job descriptions. The other thing, Jason, that, I also say is like candidates coming from a referral are 4 times as likely to get hired than other candidates. So
Hmm.
I think that's awesome. However, if you leave your referral program kind of unchecked, it can also lead to companies that aren't hiring a diverse pool of candidates, right? So
Right.
y- it can be a little bit of a double-edged sword. Like you definitely want referrals. However, research shows people tend to refer people that are just very similar to themselves.
Right.
So, I mean,
You don't want a company full of frat bros.
yeah, so having a well-designed referral program can really be set up to support your diversity goals and just making sure that program isn't kind of, unchecked.
That's great advice.
The other thing that I just realized, I forgot to mention organizations within in your community. At Aerotek, we're constantly looking for, hey, how are we partnering with community organizations to unlock pools of candidates? And that's also something you have to be looking. What are there nonprofits that are local to where you're doing business? Community organizations, groups, schools that would help you unlock some pools of candidates that maybe you wouldn't have seen otherwise, or who maybe would have a misconception that they wouldn't be hired or a fit for your company. So that's really great. There's a lot of local nonprofits in cities that will serve underrepresented groups who are extremely willing to work, and they'll help you organize career days or mentoring. Some of them even do internship programs for these
Right.
underrepresented groups.
That's awesome. I mean, sometimes the workforce that you're looking for could be right under your nose and you don't even know it. If you just,
Exactly.
expand your search and expand your horizons. What vendors can companies partner with to help deliver on those strategies to attract and retain new talent?
I've been doing it for 13 years. I think staffing partnership can
Hmm.
really make a difference in the labor market like the one we're in. So looking at vendors that are taking these things seriously, that are doing their research and figuring out ways to align themselves to the current labor market is really going to be important for strategy there. And with that being said, too, whether it's an internal vendor that you already work with or external, it's asking some of these questions, getting really
Right.
curious on what they're doing and how they're looking at it. At Aerotek, we specifically try to look at not only the customer and the culture that they have, but also the geographic location that they're in to understand, what the talent needs to have to be able to thrive in that particular location and culture.
A lot of companies that we talk to and a lot of the managers that we're working with, they don't know what they don't know. And they are doing things how they've always done them, right? Which is a very dangerous place to be these days. But if you're not expanding your horizons and, reaching out to some of the other partners or vendors that are available to provide you with information, you're really missing out because, there are companies that work with, companies like ours that work with, 10, 15, 20 other companies in your market, in your area. And so being able to utilize that information and that knowledge base to kind of expand how you're currently doing things, maybe bringing in one or two tips or tricks to attract different new talent pools can really go a long way. So I think you brought up some great points today, Quinn.
Thank you. As we wrap up here, the one thing I will say, I hope this information is helpful and part of the conversation. It's something that everybody has to be doing, right? It's a team effort
Hmm.
to really change the way that we look at the labor market right now to grow in these spaces and grow the talent pool. So it's going to take, a little bit from everyone to really get us where we need to go. But appreciate you taking the time today, Jason. This was great.
Likewise, Quinn. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. And as always, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for more incredible content.